After 11 years with the same company, I was fired by email. No meeting, no phone call, just one cold line sitting in my inbox when I opened it at 7 in the morning. Your services are no longer required. 11 years of late nights, business trips, missed holidays, and impossible deadlines, all reduced to a single sentence. I stared at the screen, waiting for more, waiting for context. There was none, just a digital erasure of my existence. My name is Daniel Hayes, 42 years old, senior corporate strategist based out of Chicago. For over a decade, I had built my reputation on being the guy who could untangle complex deals, spot weaknesses before anyone else, and push mergers over the finish line when others thought they were dead in the water. My work had secured hundreds of millions in growth for the firm. Yet, on that Tuesday morning, I became disposable. I didn't respond to the email. I didn't call HR. I didn't storm into the office demanding answers. That's not how I was wired. My father, a Marine, used to tell me that silence can be more dangerous than noise. Panic is loud. Discipline is quiet. I closed my laptop, poured a black coffee, and sat in my kitchen, replaying every move the company had made in the past 6 months. Something about the timing didn't fit. The answer came quicker than I expected. Within 2 hours, I received a push notification from a business news app. My former company was in talks to finalize a $600 million merger. The pieces snapped into place. They had cut me out deliberately. I wasn't collateral damage. I was an obstacle. They thought removing me would smooth the deal. On paper, maybe that made sense. I was the one who raised red flags about the partner company's debt structure, the one who questioned inflated valuations. To the executives, I was a problem. But in reality, I was the only one who understood the full blueprint of the deal, the documents, the contingencies, the back channels. I had built the entire framework. Without me, they weren't holding a solid merger. They were holding a house of cards. Still, I didn't reach for revenge that morning. I didn't call journalists. I didn't send threatening messages. I wrote 3 words in my notebook instead: watch, wait, move. By the afternoon, my phone buzzed with missed calls from colleagues. Some left awkward voicemails, saying they were sorry, that they didn't understand why I'd been let go. Others avoided me completely, as if I had vanished. That was fine. Let them think I was finished. Let them believe I was out of the game. Because I knew something they didn't. In corporate warfare, the loudest man in the room always loses. The one who stays quiet, who moves with precision, who lets the enemy underestimate him, he's the one who wins. So I waited. And as I waited, the cracks in their plan began to appear. The morning after that email, I sat in my home office staring at a blank legal pad. No alarm clock. No commute. No team waiting for my direction. Just silence. I didn't waste time wondering why. I already knew. They had cut me loose because I was the one man who could expose the weaknesses in that merger. I began listing everything I remembered about the deal. Names of executives. Shell companies tied to the partner. Clauses buried in the fine print. I had been the architect of the framework, and I still carried the blueprint in my head. While they celebrated my absence, I mapped out their vulnerabilities line by line. By noon, I pulled out a hard drive I had kept locked away for years. It contained drafts, emails, supporting data, nothing stolen, just the kind of working files a strategist accumulates. Most people overlook these details. I didn't. I reviewed them quietly, highlighting the pressure points that only I knew existed. The more I looked, the more I saw how fragile their position was without me. Calls came in again from colleagues. Some apologized, others asked if I knew the reason. I gave them nothing. My silence unsettled them more than any rant would have. They expected outrage, maybe even desperation. Instead, I offered calm. That calm was leverage. Late that night, I scrolled through financial news feeds. Analysts were praising the upcoming merger, calling it a bold move. They had no idea what I saw between the lines: hidden liabilities, overstated assets, clauses that would trigger penalties if overlooked. And I knew the executives hadn't noticed. They had always leaned on me for that. Now, without me, they were flying blind. I didn't interfere. Not yet. Instead, I observed. I watched their public moves, checked filings, tracked the story's growth. I knew that pressure builds best when you don't touch it. Let them climb higher. Let them feel safe. Then, when the cracks appear, the fall is twice as hard. By the end of the week, a friend from legal reached out discreetly. He said my departure had unsettled the board. He said questions were being asked. I didn't answer him directly. I just replied with one word, understood. Inside, I could already sense the tide shifting. They thought they had silenced me, but the silence was mine. And silence, when used well, is louder than any threat. So I waited. And in the waiting, I prepared. The first crack appeared on a Thursday morning, 9 days after my firing. I was sipping coffee when an alert popped up on my laptop, an SEC filing from the company. Buried in the disclosure was a line about pending adjustments tied to the partner's outstanding debt. Most readers would skim right past it, but I knew exactly what it meant. It was the same red flag I had raised in a boardroom months earlier, the same one they had dismissed as paranoia. Without me, they hadn't planned for the fallout. I closed the filing and leaned back in my chair. They were already bleeding, and they didn't even know it yet. Still, I didn't act. I let the silence stretch. Panic grows best in the absence of answers. That afternoon, a former analyst from my team called. His voice was tight, uneasy. He said leadership had been scrambling all week, asking questions they couldn't answer. He said my name kept coming up in meetings, spoken with the kind of edge that comes from fear, not anger. I thanked him, but gave nothing away. He wanted to know what my plan was. I simply said, "You'll see," and ended the call. By the weekend, the financial press had picked up on the filing. Commentators speculated about the merger's stability. Stock prices wavered. Investors wanted clarity, and clarity was the one thing they no longer had. Meanwhile, I kept moving in the shadows. I reached out to an old contact, a journalist who specialized in corporate finance. I didn't give him documents. Not yet. I simply suggested he look closer at the partner company's debt structure. I knew curiosity would do the rest. Days later, another notification hit my screen. A brief article questioning whether the merger was as clean as advertised. Just a few paragraphs, speculative, but enough to spark whispers. The market reacted. Shares slipped again. And then the call came. Sunday evening, just as I was pouring another coffee. An unfamiliar number. I let it ring twice before answering. On the other end was a corporate lawyer representing the firm. His voice was clipped, urgent. He said there had been unforeseen complications. He asked if I would consider consulting, just temporarily, to help steady the deal. I didn't answer. I let silence hang until he asked again, this time with a hint of desperation. Then I said the only word I needed. No. I ended the call and set the phone down. They had fired me to make their deal cleaner. Now they were learning what it felt like to choke on their own silence. The Monday after that call, the market opened with a dip that wiped nearly $40 million off their valuation in the first hour. Investors wanted answers. Executives scrambled to provide them. I didn't need to hear the meetings to know the mood inside the boardroom. I had lived those mornings. Pressure piling up like weight on glass, waiting for the crack to spread. By noon, another message reached me, this time from a senior vice president I once mentored. He said leadership was desperate. The merger team was unraveling. He asked if I could at least point them toward the right files, the right numbers, something to hold the ship together. I didn't reply. I let the silence sharpen. That evening, I opened my laptop and began assembling a dossier. Not for them. For me. Every document, every email, every flag liability I had once raised and watched them ignore. I laid it all out in order. A clean record. The kind of evidence no lawyer could spin away. I wasn't planning to release it yet, but I wanted it ready. Timing was everything. The next day, my journalist contact called. His voice carried that restrained excitement reporters get when they know they're circling something big. He said he'd found irregularities in the partner company's filings, inconsistencies that hinted at concealed debt. He asked if I knew more. I told him I couldn't comment, but I didn't need to. He was already digging, and soon the public would see what I had seen months ago. Inside the company, I could feel the walls closing. A second lawyer called midweek, trying to sound composed but failing. He said the board was concerned about rumors in the press, that they needed reassurance I wasn't feeding information to anyone. I let him finish, then ended the call without a word. Silence again. Silence that grew heavier with each unanswered question. By Thursday, the merger timeline had slowed. Analysts started asking on air if the deal was still viable. The phrase due diligence concerns appeared in headlines. Their smooth narrative was fracturing, and I was still sitting in my apartment, calm, steady, untouched. They had expected me to vanish quietly. Instead, I had turned their silence into a mirror, forcing them to see every flaw they had tried to bury. And the more they panicked, the quieter I became. It was working. Pressure was building, and I hadn't even moved my final piece yet. By the fifth week, their panic had grown teeth. News outlets ran daily segments on the merger, each one laced with new doubts. Words like instability and irregularities kept surfacing, spoken with that cautious tone analysts use when they smell blood. The market responded in kind. Their stocks staggered with every headline. I received another call late one night, this time from the CFO himself. His voice was strained, the kind of controlled calm that barely hides desperation. He said they wanted to make things right, that perhaps there had been a misunderstanding. He offered a consulting role, generous compensation, full discretion. He said the board respected my expertise and hoped we could put the past behind us. I listened without speaking. When he finished, I ended the call. The silence left him nowhere to go. That same week, I started moving in the shadows. Quietly, I shared selective pieces of the dossier I had built, not to the press, but to a trusted contact on the regulatory side. Nothing explosive, just enough to raise questions that would slow the deal even further. Questions they couldn't answer without me. Each small disclosure was like tapping glass with a hammer, fine cracks spreading wider. Meanwhile, the journalist called again. His story was growing. He said he had sources whispering that my departure was tied directly to the merger. He asked if I wanted to go on record. I told him no. Silence was still my strongest weapon. The absence of my voice forced him to fill the gap with speculation, and speculation was poison in a market already jittery. By Friday, reports leaked that the merger contract had stalled in final review. Investors demanded explanations. The board issued a statement calling the process normal, but the tone was hollow, defensive. Anyone reading between the lines could sense the fear. I spent that weekend walking along the lake, clear skies above me, no phone in my pocket. They were scrambling, bleeding credibility by the hour. And all I had done was wait. When I returned home Sunday night, there were 12 missed calls. 2 from lawyers, 3 from executives, the rest from numbers I didn't recognize. The last voicemail was the most telling. A voice heavy with panic, begging me to call back, saying I was the only one who could salvage what they had built. They were right. I was the only one, but I had no intention of saving them. I wasn't finished yet. By midweek, the pressure inside that company was reaching a breaking point. The market had shaved nearly $120 million off their valuation in less than 10 days. The press circled like vultures, replaying the same questions executives couldn't answer. Every public statement sounded weaker, more rehearsed, more hollow. I didn't need inside sources to know the panic was real, but they came anyway. A junior associate I once mentored sent me a late-night email. He said the board was fracturing. That half wanted to delay the merger while the other half pushed to finalize before the leaks grew louder. He said the office felt like a bunker under siege. I read his words twice, then deleted the message. I couldn't risk leaving a trace. Instead, I kept adding to my dossier. Drafts of contracts, projections I had once built, my own notes scrawled during those marathon meetings months ago. Every page told the same story. They had ignored the warnings because they wanted the payday. And now the cracks they dismissed were widening into fractures. Thursday morning, I received another call from legal. This one wasn't smooth or polite. The lawyer's voice was sharp, demanding to know if I was speaking to regulators, if I was interfering with the merger. I didn't answer. I simply let the silence hang until he finally said my name again, his tone unsteady, before I ended the call without a word. Silence, once again, did more damage than a denial ever could. That evening, the journalist published his first major piece. It was a feature article, front page of the finance section. He laid out the inconsistencies in the partner company's filings, quoted analysts raising red flags, and hinted, carefully, that my sudden departure was no coincidence. My name wasn't mentioned, but the shadow of it was everywhere between the lines. The effect was immediate. The stock slid another 6% overnight. Investors demanded a full audit. Regulators issued inquiries. The company tried to spin it as standard procedure, but no one believed it. Their carefully crafted image of strength was collapsing. I spent that night sitting in the dark, the city lights flickering outside my window, listening to the quiet. They had fired me to secure their $600 million prize. Instead, they had secured chaos. And I hadn't raised my voice once. They thought I was gone. What they didn't realize was that I was still in the room, invisible but undeniable, and the silence was killing them faster than any words could. The regulators moved faster than I expected. By Monday morning, I read headlines announcing that the Securities and Exchange Commission had opened a preliminary review into the merger. Words like possible misrepresentation and failure to disclose liabilities were printed in bold across every business outlet. For the first time, the deal wasn't framed as bold. It was framed as reckless. I poured a coffee and watched the coverage, calm as ever. The executives who cut me out were suddenly the faces of crisis management. Their interviews were stiff, their smiles forced. I knew those eyes. I'd seen them before in war rooms when a deal was slipping. The look of men who realized too late that they were no longer in control. Calls came daily now, not just from lawyers, but from board members themselves. They wanted me back, even for a single consultation, even off the record. Some dangled money, some dangled power. I responded to none of them. Each unanswered attempt twisted the knife deeper. They weren't begging for my skills, they were begging for protection. Meanwhile, I fine-tuned my dossier. I built timelines showing exactly when warnings had been raised and ignored. I aligned board meeting notes with financial projections. I compiled a map of every red flag I had identified months earlier. Each page was a quiet indictment, a reminder that they had fired the one person who could have saved them. By midweek, the journalist called again. He said the SEC inquiry had intensified after outside sources provided documentation. I didn't confirm or deny. I didn't need to. The timing spoke for itself. He told me the market was whispering my name, that insiders believed I was the ghost haunting the merger. I said nothing, then ended the call. That Thursday, the partner company's CEO gave a press conference. He tried to reassure investors, but his voice shook when pressed about hidden debt. Watching him stumble under the cameras, I felt no satisfaction, only certainty. This was the natural conclusion of arrogance. And then, late that night, another voicemail arrived. This one wasn't bargaining. It was pleading. A senior executive admitted they had made mistakes, admitted they needed me to clean up what was left. He said the survival of the company depended on it. I deleted the message without listening to the end. Their survival had never been my responsibility. Not anymore. The trap was nearly closed. All that remained was the final turn of the screw. The final strike didn't come with noise. It came with precision. I had spent weeks watching them stumble, weeks letting the silence hollow them out. Now it was time to close the circle. On a rainy Tuesday morning, I scheduled a package to be delivered, sealed envelopes sent directly to 3 board members I trusted years ago, men who respected results more than spin. Inside each envelope was a copy of my dossier, dates, contracts, and projections that proved the executives had ignored warnings to push the merger forward. No opinions, no commentary, just facts, cold and undeniable. By afternoon, my phone lit up with unfamiliar numbers. I didn't answer. The silence would tell them all they needed to know. By evening, headlines exploded. Anonymous sources close to the board had confirmed that senior leadership had withheld critical information. The SEC expanded their inquiry. Shares plunged another 10% overnight. I watched it unfold from my apartment window, the city glowing below me. Their empire was collapsing not because I shouted, but because I never said a word. The weight of evidence was heavier than any argument I could make. The next day, an emergency board meeting was leaked to the press. Executives were grilled, their leadership questioned openly. The CFO who once called me with offers of money now faced rumors of resignation. The same CEO who had sent me that cold email, the one line that ended 11 years of loyalty, was photographed leaving headquarters with his jaw clenched, avoiding cameras. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet. Friends asked what was happening, if I had a hand in it. I just shook my head. Silence again. The truth didn't need me to speak. It was already doing the work. That Thursday, a lawyer called one last time. His voice was different now, broken, weary. He said the board knew I had the answers, that I could still salvage the wreckage. He begged me to meet, even off the record, even in secret. I let him finish. Then I said the only 2 words I had saved for the end. Too late. And with that, I ended the call. No threats. No demands. Just closure. The merger they fired me to secure was now crumbling under the weight of its own deception. They had gambled $600 million and lost. All because they believed silence meant weakness. They were wrong. Silence had been the weapon all along. The fallout was swift. Within a week of the dossier reaching the board, 2 top executives were placed on administrative leave. The polite phrase couldn't hide the truth. They had been forced out. News outlets called it a shakeup. I knew it was survival. The board needed blood to calm investors, and the men who thought I was disposable became the first sacrifices. The merger talks froze completely. Regulators circled tighter, issuing subpoenas, demanding records, pulling apart every number the executives had once flaunted with confidence. The $600 million deal that was supposed to crown their careers was now radioactive. No one wanted to touch it. I followed the story like an outsider, sipping my coffee while anchors dissected their downfall. But behind the calm, I felt a deep satisfaction. 11 years of work had been erased with a single sentence. Your services are no longer required. Now, their reputations were being erased in kind, not by my words, but by their own arrogance exposed. Friends began to reach out again, cautiously at first. Some said I had been right all along. Others whispered that my name was being spoken inside the company, not with anger anymore, but with respect and regret. I didn't respond. Respect too late is no respect at all. The journalist's second article broke the final barrier. He revealed insider knowledge of the executives ignoring warnings, hinted at deliberate concealment. While he never named me, his readers weren't stupid. The market assumed the truth. Someone inside had known, someone with enough precision to leave no doubts. One night, while walking home, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a board member. Not a lawyer, not an executive, a director I had once worked closely with. His voice was steady, almost formal. He said the board wanted to meet with me, to discuss opportunities, to restore trust. I let him speak, then thanked him politely before hanging up, because trust was something they had burned the moment they sent that email. By Friday, the company's stock hit its lowest point in 3 years. Analysts speculated about bankruptcy if the merger collapsed fully. The empire I had helped build was crumbling, stone by stone. And still, I said nothing. My silence had already spoken louder than any testimony ever could. They had discarded me as if I were nothing. Now, they were learning what nothing sounds like when it answers back. The collapse was complete. By the end of the quarter, the $600 million merger had been officially abandoned. Publicly, they called it a strategic withdrawal. Privately, everyone knew it was failure. The executives who had signed my termination email were gone, stripped of titles, reputations in ashes. Their careers ended not with applause, but with silence. I walked past their headquarters one morning. The building looked the same, polished glass, the company logo shining against the sky, but I knew the walls inside were hollow. The men who once believed they owned the future had been reduced to footnotes. And I hadn't lifted my voice once. I never released a statement. I never gave an interview. I let speculation do the work for me. People said I was the reason regulators had acted. They said I had built the case that destroyed the deal. I neither confirmed nor denied. I didn't need to. Silence, once again, was louder than confession. The board circled back weeks later, making another offer. They wanted me to return, this time with more authority, more freedom, direct access to the top. It was their way of rebuilding trust, their attempt to salvage what remained. I turned them down. Some bridges aren't worth crossing again, even if rebuilt. Especially if rebuilt. Instead, I moved forward. Consulting offers poured in from firms that had once competed against me. They saw the way I had dismantled my old company without a word and wanted that precision on their side. I chose carefully, not for the money. I already had enough. But for the freedom. For the silence. At night, I sometimes opened that original email, the one that ended 11 years with a single sentence. I read it once, then closed it again. It no longer stung. It reminded me of the exact moment they underestimated me, mistaking calm for weakness. I had waited. I had watched. I had moved. And when the time came, I didn't need noise to win. I let them collapse under the weight of their own greed. Some men fight back with rage. Some men demand recognition. I did neither. I simply chose silence, and silence dismantled everything they thought was unshakable. That was the end of my story with them. Not a shout, not a courtroom battle, just the quiet sound of an empire crumbling, piece by piece, while I walked away untouched. And when the dust settled, one truth remained clear. They had fired me to secure their future. Instead, they had secured mine. been through it. When they crossed a line, and you made sure they felt it.